Welcome! In the past few lessons, we've covered a few critical concepts when it comes to actually performing your consulting tasks. You may have found that the process is all but linear, and there are some times where unforeseen issues pop up. Or there are some changes to the project scope or project solving method. In this lesson, I want to talk about how you can navigate these bumps in the task completion road in an effective way so that changes don't derail your deliverables. First, I'll quickly mention the reason for iterations in a project. We don't really want there to be any scope creep in a project because the value delivered and costs incurred are often not accurately agreed upon in these situations. But there may be some times where, to value add from your firm side, some additional items are added to the scope of the project. Again, this is not ideal, but it happens. Something that happens more often, however, is that through working through the scope of work, you uncover some additional information, like constraints or alternate solution methods. Or after a feedback session with a client, you see that your assumptions do not line up with the client's assumptions, and a few sessions may be necessary to iron out those details. We will discuss the iteration mindset, an effective iteration workflow, handling unforeseen issues, communicating through iterations, and time management for iterations. When we discuss the iteration mindset, none of us like redoing what we've already done. We want to solve a problem and have it stay solved. This was quite a nice, safe zone while studying. The problem was set out and you work at the answer and there is an end to the activity. But in industry, iteration is normal, expected, and even welcomed. The addition of iteration into a workflow is an indication that the project is alive. The solution can approach an optimal state. Each cycle is an opportunity to improve the solution and should not be seen as a sign of failure. This should be an encouragement to you, and I believe this is the backbone to experiencing success early on in your career. The mindset shift that iteration on your work pushes it closer to excellence. At this stage, being a junior, you are not in charge of projects yet, but you are a valuable team member. Your focus is on managing files, documenting, proposing options, and raising red flags if you see them early on. I would like to propose this workflow as a good starting point to just have a footing. You could also adjust this to fit your specific project needs and details. At the first sign of an iteration, the first thing you do is to capture your current state. Save milestone versions of your work. Write down all key assumptions and decisions that got you to the point where you are at. Then, assess the need for change. Ask yourself or your senior, is this a minor adjustment or a fundamental shift? Will other aspects of the project be impacted by this adjustment? Is the change still aligned with the client's core requirement? Sometimes the answer to these questions are out of your control, and this is something you'll need to absorb. Sometimes an adjustment does not align, but the value proposition to the client warrants that it is done. Make a note of this and talk to your senior after the completion of the project to get a better understanding of the other factors at play. Always check in with your seniors or technical leads if you foresee significant changes. Don't work in isolation and validate technical changes with more experienced colleagues. Learn as much as you can from those that have traversed iterations more than you have. Then, when you are implementing the changes, make sure they are implemented methodically. Make one change at a time, if it's possible. Document each step and the rationale behind each step, and track the impact of each change. This is such critical documentation from your side, as a future reader or reviewer would be able to follow along and support the final deliverable. And after you've implemented, you should validate the changes. Run the appropriate checks as you would if the iteration had been part of the main workflow from the beginning. Compare the results with the previous iterations and ensure that the required outcome was actually achieved. Well, we've discussed what to do with iterations. These are a little lower stress than issues. So, to handle unforeseen issues, the first thing is don't panic. Now, you assess the impact and urgency of the issue. Determine if this issue threatens project deadlines or deliverables, and you should evaluate if safety and performance is compromised. You could use a triage for assessing the impact and urgency, call it critical, moderate, and minor, and then escalate the issue appropriately. So for critical issues, you should alert your senior immediately. For moderate issues, you should wait for your next scheduled interaction. And for minor issues, you should discuss it with your senior, indicate that it's minor, and also talk about what you propose to do to address it. So, when you are discussing this issue, try to come up with 2 to 3 possible approaches to solve it. Outline the pros and cons of the different options and have a recommendation of what you think is best to do. This serves as a way to not upward delegate your work and shows initiative on your end, a good look for a junior. If your solution is not acceptable, try to learn as much as possible from the concepts that you didn't know to address. Finally, record the issue and how it was resolved. Update the process documentation to prevent the issue from recurring and share your learnings with the team. If you don't have sessions for lessons learned, draw up an email and request that it be sent to the team from your senior. Again, showing initiative and collaboration. With every iteration and issue, communication and documentation is so critical. There are 3 main stakeholders that you should keep in mind when communicating, and also keep the messaging to these stakeholders in mind. The first is your team. They are working with you on the issue, so it's important to be transparent about challenges. Ask them for help early. Don't wait until the deadline. Share your discoveries because it might help others. The second stakeholder is your client. With clients, it's important to keep the reputation of the company in focus and present your iterations as improvements rather than corrections. This is something to discuss at length with your senior, as every company has a different policy. Explain the changes made in non-technical terms and focus on the solution rather than the problem. The third stakeholder is future you or future consultants, communicated with in the form of documentation. Make sure to maintain a change log for your projects, as discussed before. Have a clear version history documented in the deliverables and write out the rationale for significant changes in reference documentation. These will definitely come in handy in future for you or for others. Okay, so practically we know what to do, but we need to address the concept of time as well. As iterations are a welcomed part of the project lifecycle, we then should plan for iterations. We should always build in buffer time in the activities set out in the scope of work. So, have some additional time you may be able to spend on expected iterations. Then prioritize changes based on the impact of these changes. Sometimes, some changes might not be impactful and therefore unnecessary, or highly impactful but time-consuming, requiring the buffer allocation of other tasks. But it's critical that you start learning how to distinguish iterations, issues, improvements, and perfectionism. If something is not yet perfect but practically valuable enough for submission, and the time spent to make it perfect might be detrimental to project timeline, then perhaps keeping the project imperfect but delivered is the better call to make. Remember, as a junior engineer, you're not expected to get everything right the first time. What matters is how effectively you adapt, learn, and improve through each iteration cycle. I've made a little flowchart to help you decide whether you should act or escalate, walking you through some technical project-based and communication-based checks so you don't have to rely on guesswork. This flowchart is a good starting point when you don't know what to do, but as you find out what to do, build it out to fit your specific working case. And then, for this lesson, I have an activity for you to complete again. You will walk through a simulated scenario using the worksheet to determine your course of action, and completing the effective iteration workflow to determine your next steps. It'll be a good idea to practice capturing your decisions, impact, and rationale. I have 2 scenarios for you to choose from for a project that is most closely related to your current work activities. All right, let's get to the activity.